Jake just turned 25. 3 days ago, he was a regular person. Today, his net worth is $240 million. His startup just sold for $1.2 billion, and his phone has not stopped vibrating since the deal closed. His college roommate sent a meme. His high school friend he has not spoken to in 4 years suddenly texted. His cousin, who never calls, called twice. His mom cried on the phone. His dad went quiet in a way Jake had never heard before. And Jake is sitting alone in a hotel room in San Francisco, staring at a number on his laptop screen. $240 million, and feeling something he did not expect to feel. Nothing. Not happiness, not relief, not excitement, just a strange, quiet emptiness. And the desperate, uncomfortable feeling that everything around him just changed, and nothing will ever be exactly the same again. This is what becoming a billionaire at 25 actually feels like. Not the podcast version, not the motivational poster version, the real version. Jake started his company at 22 in a one-bedroom apartment. He and his co-founder worked 18-hour days for 3 years. They ate cheap food, wore the same clothes for days, missed weddings and birthdays and holidays. They believed in something so completely that everything else felt like a distraction. At 23, Jake raised his first round of venture capital, $2 million. Suddenly, he had employees. Suddenly, he had a board. Suddenly, other people's livelihoods depended on decisions Jake made before he was old enough to rent a car without a surcharge. The pressure was not glamorous. It was not exciting. It was a constant low-level terror that never fully went away, even on the good days, especially on the good days. Because on the good days, Jake knew exactly how far there was to fall. At 24, the company started scaling. Revenue went from nothing to $40 million in 12 months. Jake had not slept more than 5 hours in 8 months. He had not been on a date in over a year. He had not called his grandmother back in 3 weeks, and he thought about that every single day. The company was everything. The company was the only thing. And then the acquisition offer came. $1.2 billion. Jake and his co-founder sat in a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon and looked at the number. And neither of them said anything for a very long time. They signed the papers on a Thursday. Jake's share landed in his account on a Monday, $240 million. And now, here is what nobody tells you about what happens next. The first thing Jake felt was not joy. It was fear. A completely new kind of fear. The fear of someone who has just been handed something so enormous that losing it feels more terrifying than never having had it. The second thing Jake felt was loneliness. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being different, of being in a room full of people who love you, and knowing that something invisible has shifted between you and every single one of them. His friends from college were genuinely happy for him, and also slightly uncomfortable around him in a way they could not name and he could not fix. His family was proud of him, and also slightly distant in a way that had nothing to do with geography. Money at that level does not just change your bank account. It changes the air in every room you walk into. It changes what people say to you, and more importantly, what they stop saying. Jake bought a $3 million apartment in San Francisco. He furnished it carefully. He filled it with things he had always wanted, and he spent most of his evenings eating takeout alone on a couch that cost $12,000, wondering if he should call someone, and not being sure who that someone was anymore. Here's what Jake learned in the first year of having $240 million. Money solves the problems that money can solve and reveals the problems that money cannot touch. Jake never worried about rent again, never worried about medical bills, never worried about his parents in retirement. Those problems dissolved overnight and he was genuinely grateful. But the problems that money could not solve, the loneliness, the identity crisis of not knowing who you are when the company that defined you is gone. The anxiety that came from having so much to lose, those problems got louder, not quieter. Jake spent his second year figuring out who he was without the startup, without the 18-hour days, without the mission that had consumed his entire identity for 3 years. He traveled, he read, he invested in other founders. He started running every morning not because it was productive, but because it made him feel like a person again. And slowly, quietly, he started to rebuild. Not his net worth, but himself. Here is the truth about becoming a billionaire at 25. The money is real, the freedom is real, the ability to never worry about the basics of survival ever again. That is real, and it matters enormously. But the version of this story that gets told on podcasts and Instagram and motivational videos is missing the most important part. The part where you sit in a $12,000 couch in a $3 million apartment and realize that you built everything you said you wanted, and now you have to figure out who you are. When you finally have it, you have been decoded. If this video showed you a version of wealth nobody else is honest about, subscribe to Money Decoder 3004. Every single week, we decode the financial journey that ordinary Americans are never shown the full truth of, simply, honestly, and clearly. Drop a comment below. Would you trade everything for $240 million at 25? Tell me honestly. I read every single comment, and I will see you in the next decode.